Can the Broncos put it all together in week 2 against the Indianapolis Colts after a shaky performance from the offense and a dominating performance from the Denver defense? We'll find out. What's up, Broncos country? My name is Brandon Gilchrist. This episode will be talking about what's happening this week surrounding the Broncos, along with previewing this week's matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. Let's start with the word on the beat this week. Well, the biggest news coming out of this week surrounds the Denver Broncos stadium. The Walton-Penner Ownership Group announcing a preferred site at Burnham Yard. I'm incredibly excited about this, y'all. The Broncos, I think Empower Field is a great stadium, but I completely understand where the ownership is coming from when it comes to implementing the latest technology, all the various types of fan experiences that you can find with some of the newer stadiums. I think the biggest thing coming out of this is being able to host those premier events, right? Like a Super Bowl, like a Final Four. Some of the biggest artists that are out there won't perform in open stadiums. So being able to close the roof, and that announcement including that there'll be a retractable roof, it completely makes business sense. Along with some of the other features that were announced around the stadium, Burnham Yard, a historic site. It's been there since before Colorado was established as a state, so about 150 years. It's just this deserted land that's out there close to downtown, which is pretty incredible to think about in today's age. The ownership group seems to be buying, at least right now, about 100 acres worth of property with potential expectation of there being a little bit more there. Some of the features that they've announced around the stadium, along with the retractable roof, is a natural grass field, which is excellent to see. And I know for the players, when it comes to their health and experience, being on natural grass is absolutely preferred. Sean Payton also mentioned it in his press conference, having a preference for natural grass. So great to see that it's still going to be a feature of the new stadium as well. Another element that they announced, there'll be no new taxes for Denver residents, and I know that has to be peace of mind for those living in Denver. What that does mean is that likely personal seat licenses or private seat licenses is going to be a thing, because generally when something like a stadium is privately funded, which is what is going to happen with the new Denver Broncos stadium, that ultimately means that some of that cost, some of the burden of financing a stadium is going to be passed to those who use it regularly. And in this case, that means season ticket holders. We'll have to see. The ownership group has done a phenomenal job when it comes to the fan experience, the player experience. When it comes to what private seat licenses and personal seat licenses are going to be, maybe there'll be some sort of compromise there so it's not astronomical cost to those that are season ticket holders. We all know at the end of the day, it's a business and there has to be the opportunity to be able to recoup some of the costs when it comes to building a new stadium and something that people are going to use. Personal seat licenses is just where the league is headed. That being said, it'll be exciting to see some of the new features and things that are going to be available at the new stadium and to be able to take advantage of to just elevate that fan experience to even just another level. Another awesome feature that has been announced around the stadium is the ability to make it a multi-use site with a lot of features happening right around it. We know traditionally, and this is the case for Empower Field at Mile High now, it is just surrounded by parking lots. And so what that means in this case is with the new stadium, having a lot more ability to stay on site because there'll be shops, there'll be restaurants, there'll be other types of entertainment that also surround the campus when it comes to being in the area around the stadium. At this point, we're probably still about 12 months away from there being really any sort of design plans. It's just a preferred site announcement, which means they need to start working with the community. They need to start working with any of the constituents and people that may be impacted by this announcement. They'll have to start working through the details of what all of that looks like. They have signed a community benefits agreement as well, meaning that it will be ultimately beneficial to the community in some form or fashion. Ultimately, the goal is to make it mutually beneficial for all of those parties involved, which is great to see. The goal at this point is for the stadium to be opened and ready for the 2031 season. I don't think this ownership group takes anything that they do lightly, and they want it to be top notch. So I would expect nothing but that same level of expectation when it comes to a brand new stadium. Now, let's take a look at the matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos. This week, the Broncos will be traveling for their first away game of the year. Daniel Jones, coming off his debut performance with the Colts after spending almost 6 seasons with the New York Giants. He was benched halfway through 2024 and then spent the remainder of the season as a backup for the Vikings, basically going through rehab. He was phenomenal in his debut. 22 of 29 for 272 yards, 1 passing touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns. He had a great performance against the Miami Dolphins, and frankly, it definitely leads to questions of how good the Miami Dolphins were, how good that defense was that they played. He wasn't pressured much at all. I believe there were only 2 pressures that happened on him all game. He's going to be facing a much tougher defense this time around, and Denver defensive line that we have and the phenomenal depth and rotation, he's going to be under pressure all day, and I expect this defense to make sure that performance doesn't happen. When it comes to Jonathan Taylor, he didn't go over 100 yards here in his first game, but I would imagine there's going to be a little bit of extra motivation for Jonathan Taylor this time around after what happened against the Broncos last year where he fumbled on the goal line, and that signaled a shift in momentum for last year's game. The Colts also drafted Tyler Warren, a player that I was actually very intrigued about and excited about, and in some ways hoping the Broncos would draft. I know they did some extensive research on him before he was drafted this past year. 7 catches for 76 yards. He's a complete tight end, able to block, able to run routes, catches the football phenomenally. He actually is able to throw the football as well. He is a all-around phenomenal player, and he's going to be someone Broncos are absolutely going to have a defensive plan for, because as we know, the tight end is that outlet and that safety measure for a quarterback. And if Daniel Jones doesn't have him as a target, that's going to go a long way in sealing the victory for this team. Now, the Colts defense, they sacked Tua 3 times, intercepted him twice, and forced a fumble. So a pretty solid performance overall from the Colts defense. Bo Nix is absolutely going to have to be on his P's and Q's this week. The Colts were one of the teams that actually intercepted him twice last year. We definitely know we do not want a repeat performance of last week to happen against the Colts. Taking a look at the health report around the Colts, 2 of their starting corners, Jalen Jones and Travarius Ward, look like they will not be playing in this game. That does mean that even though we want to see more from the run game for the Broncos, there is a possibility that the passing game is a focus, with the run game being complementary. Ultimately, I think we've got to have balance no matter which way it goes, but I would not be surprised to see us come out and test the backup corners versus the run game being the leading offensive effort for this week's matchup. Now let's take a look at the Broncos. The defense obviously is coming off of a phenomenal performance in week 1. 6 sacks. The Titans were 2 of 14 in converting third downs. Nick Bonito leads the league currently with 9 QB pressures just coming out of week 1. Talanoa Hufanga was everywhere. Our receiver didn't have a catch on Patrick Surtain. I expect that defensive performance to continue into week 2. Looking at Bo Nix in the offense, they obviously need to get things going sooner. They were a few key drops and runs away from really running away with this game. A key drop right on the first drive that would have led to a touchdown. RJ Harvey getting the ball 6 times for 70 yards. Let's see his tick go up a little bit. I'd love to see Nix also use his legs a bit more and running a bit more. There were definitely a few opportunities out there where the defense is going to give you the yards. Take the yards with your feet. Keep the drive going. Finally, I expect improvement from the special teams. Darren Rizzi mentioned this week during his press conference that kickers, especially with the new kickoff rules, are going to start ticking up and being more precise when it comes to kicking off. And it definitely seems like it's a focus for the Broncos to pin teams within the 20. That's definitely an aggressive approach. I'm not opposed to it, as long as the coverage is there. We can't have another 71-yard return or that being a regular occurrence for the Broncos, because that will work against us ultimately. It didn't in week 1, but it absolutely has the potential to work against us with some of the teams we're facing on the remainder of the schedule. If we're wanting to try and pin teams back, absolutely for it, but let's make sure that kick coverage is also there. When it comes to the health report for the Broncos this week, I'm actually extremely encouraged. Evan Ingram practiced fully. We need to see what the final decision will be. Dre Greenlaw continues to not practice. It seems like they are being extremely cautious with him and aiming to have him play against the Chargers or that key Monday night game against the Bengals. There's usually a 2-week ramp-up time. If that is the case, then I would expect the Bengals to be the more likely time that we see Dre Greenlaw. There always seems to be about a 2-week ramp-up of limited and full practices for players that are coming off or dealing with injuries when it comes to the Broncos. With that logic in mind and the fact that he didn't practice this week, I would expect that Dre Greenlaw, we start to see him practice next week on a limited basis and then move to full practice the next week leading up to the Bengals game. We also saw JFM, or Jonathan Franklin Myers, on the injury report. Initially, with a do not practice on Wednesday, gave us a little bit of concern. Again, we'll have to look and see what the final decision will be there when it comes to game time, but it does seem like JFM is good to go, and he is a key piece of that line and making sure that the defense is pushing Daniel Jones off of his spot. Finally, we saw Nate Atkins get some practice time in this week, which is really great to see. He's practicing this week on a limited basis. I would expect that next week is when we'll see Nate Atkins really tick up in terms of his practice time, practicing fully, and then I think we'll see him for that Chargers matchup. All in all, a pretty encouraging health report for the Broncos, which will be definitely key in making sure we're well matched up against the Colts. On the transaction side, the Broncos did sign Deuce Vaughn to their practice squad. This individual, they played college at Kansas State. Most recently, they were with the Dallas Cowboys. He's always been, when you think about the Sean Payton offense, as more of that Darren Sproles prototype. He's 5'5", 5'6", built sort of stocky, very much like Darren Sproles, can do it all. You don't expect him to necessarily pass protect, but in terms of being a dynamic catcher out of the backfield, a dynamic runner, somebody who can get lost back there as blocks set up and then already be past defenders before they even realize where he is. That's what Deuce Vaughn is. He's on the practice squad now, so it's more of note, and we'll see where it goes from here. All in all, I think this is another great test for the Broncos. We really do have a nice ramp up when it comes to the season this year. Our matchups only get tougher from here, so we really need to see some improvement from week 1 to week 2. I fully expect the Broncos to walk away with a win here in Indianapolis, sealing their first road win. All right, Broncos country, what do you think about the matchup this week? Do you have any concerns with Daniel Jones' performance from week 1? Do you have any concerns with the offense itself and the matchups that the team may face this week? Let me know in the comments. Be kind. Until next time, take care.